The dragon rework in Blox fruits is an increasingly relevant topic in the community, especially with Indra saying that it's coming soon. And with dragon being currently unavailable to purchase from the stock or as a permanent fruit, the value is surely going to increase next update, and with it, the amount of damage it does, and maybe the amount of people who don't shower. So this begs the question, on a scale from 1 to 10, how braindead and spammy will the dragon rework be? Or even better, how strong will it be in general? By the way, I'm giving away a $20 Roblox gift card to a random person in my Discord server when I reach 10,000 subscribers. Here's how to enter. I also need help proving my dad wrong by earning money from YouTube, so help me out by watching the video to the end so I can get to 4,000 watch hours. Don't forget to subscribe since it's free, it takes a second, and I'll love you if you do. Anyway, on with the video. So to answer the question of how strong it will be after the update, we need to look back at the most recent spammy zoan fruits that were released and make a connection between the prices and damage outputs. By the way, there will be chapters in this video for each move, since I will be going pretty in-depth analyzing each of these aspects for all the zoan fruits for every single one of their moves. So without further ado, let's lay some ground rules. The zones that I will be looking at for these stats are in the following order: Current Dragon, Awakened Phoenix, Leopard, Mammoth, Kitsune, and T-Rex. This is purely based on their release dates, but I'll do my best to organize them by price and damage too. I excluded Falcon and Buddha because who the hell uses Falcon for anything other than the wings, and nobody uses Buddha for its own moves. So first, the Untransformed click moves. For Phoenix, pretty simple, the M1s do 1,788 damage, but for Kitsune it depends since technically the click move is 5 clicks with no cooldown, but on the wiki it says that with 1 tail the damage of 5 clicks is 6,266, while at 3 tails it's 9,668. So we can average and take the middle of 7,967 damage and divide it by 5 to find the average damage per click, which is about 1,593 damage. And for the last zoan fruit with a click move untransformed, T-Rex, the click move does 5,013 damage between 4 clicks, and that averages to around 1,253 damage. The average of all the untransformed click moves is 1,555 damage. Now for the untransformed Z moves. For Current Dragon, it gets a little blurry since unfortunately the people who made the wiki page for it are a little acoustic, but based on NPC testing, the Z move Heatwave Beam does 3,591 damage. For Phoenix, the Z move Cremation Cannon does 3,251 damage. For Leopard, the Z move Finger Revolver does 4,733 damage. For Mammoth, the Z move Ancient Cutter does 3,481 damage. For Kitsune, the Z move Accursed Enchantment does 3,581 damage, although there is some burn damage, so it may be a little off. And finally, for T-Rex, the Z move Tail Swipe does 3,223 damage. This means that the average damage for the untransformed Z move of a zoan is 3,654 damage. Now for the untransformed X moves. For Current Dragon, the X move Draconic Claw does somewhere between 3,770 damage and 5,202 damage, so we'll take the middle of around 4,486 damage. For Phoenix, the X move Blue Flames highly depends on how long the user holds it for, and the mechanic is unique to Phoenix, so we'll be excluding it for this video. For Leopard, the X move Spiraling Kick does 3,399 damage. For Mammoth, the X move True Prehistoric does 3,481 damage. For Kitsune, the X move Tales of Burning Agony does 3,601 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the X move Predatory Screech does 5,668 damage. This means that the average damage for the untransformed X move of a zoan is around 4,127 damage. Now for the untransformed C moves. For Current Dragon, the C move Fire Shower does between 853 and 5,360 damage. It's a crazy gap, but it makes sense since it's a held move. Assuming all the little bullets hit though, we'll go with 5,360, the maximum. For Phoenix, the C move Flame Exodus does 3,585 damage. For Leopard, the C move After Image Assault does 3,966 damage. For Mammoth, the C move Colossal Crusher does 3,867 damage. For Kitsune, the C move Foxfire Disruption does 6,078 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the C move Hunter's Rage does between 3,491 and 3,939 damage. The average of this is 3,715. This means that the average damage for the untransformed C move of a zoan is 4,429 damage. Now for the untransformed V moves. For Current Dragon, the V move Transformation does no damage, so it won't be considered. For Phoenix, the V move does 3,251 damage. For Leopard, it does 2,428 damage. For Mammoth, the V move does 1,894 damage. For Kitsune, the V move does 2,686 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the V move Reptilian Scales does 2,148 damage. This means that the average damage for the untransformed V move of a zoan, if they have damage, is 2,481. Now for the untransformed F moves. All F moves, untransformed or not, will be divided into 2 categories: single attack and damage per tick. For Current Dragon, the F move Dragonflight does no damage, so again, it won't be counted. But for Phoenix, the F move Swift Flight does do damage, and it is tick damage with 181 damage per tick. For Leopard, the F move Body Flicker does 2,000 3,914 damage. For Mammoth, the F move Stampede does 3,867 damage. For Kusanit, the F move Walled Assault does between 3,409 and 3,967 damage, which averages to 3,688 damage. And finally, for T-Rex, the F move Gigantic Leap does 3,223 damage. This means that the average single attack damage for the untransformed F move of a Zoan is 3,423, and the average damage per tick is 181. Now for Transform. So first, the Transform click moves. Dragon doesn't have any, so it won't be counted. Phoenix actually does the same amount of damage per click, transformed or not. For Leopard, it depends, since the click attack is made up of 4 consecutive clicks, 3 slashes followed by a roar that does more damage. These 4 attacks total to 6,313 damage, and dividing it by 4 gives us around 1,578 damage for Leopard's click move. For Mammoth, it's 7,735 damage divided between 4 clicks, which averages to about 1,934 damage. For Kitsune, there's not actually the transform damage on the wiki, so I had to do my own research by testing it with Kitsune myself in-game. I found that the click moves do 10,395 damage divided between 5 clicks, so it averages to 2,079 damage per click. Lastly, for T-Rex, the transform click damage is 5,765 divided between 4 clicks, so it has an average of 1,441 damage per click. The average of all the transform click moves is 1,764 damage. Now for the transform Z move. For Current Dragon, the Z move does the same amount of damage transformed as it does untransformed, which is pretty surprising. For Phoenix, the Z move does 3,451 damage. For Leopard, it does 6,220 damage. For Mammoth, the Z move does 4,061 damage. For Kitsune, it does 4,690 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the Z move does 3,581 damage. This means that the average damage for the transform Z move of a Zoan is 4,266 damage. Now for the transformed X moves. For Current Dragon, the X move does somewhere between 3,581 and 4,476 damage. So we'll take the middle of 4,029 damage, which is surprisingly actually less than untransformed. For Phoenix, the X move still depends on how long you hold it for, so again, we're not going to count it. For Leopard, the X move does 4,209 damage. For Mammoth, it does 3,867 damage. For Kitsune, the X move does 4,235 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the X move does 5,489 damage. This means that the average damage for the transformed X move of a Zoan is 4,366 damage. Now for the untransformed C moves, for Current Dragon, the C move does between 3,078 and 6,678 damage. Assuming all the bullets hit, we'll count 6,674, like we did with the untransformed C move. For Phoenix, the C move does the same 3,585 damage as untransformed. For Leopard, the C move does 4,532 damage. For Mammoth, 4,252 damage. For Kitsune, the C move does 6,423 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the C move does 3,312 damage, which is less than untransformed. This means that the average damage for the transform C move of a Zoan is 4,796 damage. None of the transform Z moves do any damage, so the average is 0. Now for the transformed F moves, as I said, they will be divided into single attack and damage per tick. For Current Dragon, the F move Dragonflight does not do damage, so again, it won't be counted. For Phoenix, the F move does 2,601 damage. For Leopard, the F move does 3,561 damage. For Mammoth, the F move does 853 damage per tick. For Kitsune, the F move does 4,421 damage. And finally for T-Rex, the F move does 3,581 damage. This means that the average single attack damage for the transformed F move of a Zoan is 3,541 damage. The average damage per tick is 853. Now after all of that, we still have to connect the damage to the prices of the fruits, since it's likely that Dragon will become the most expensive fruit once reworked, and maybe there's some link between price and damage. If we divide the damage per move by the price of the fruit, we can see how much damage each fruit does per belly. Damage per belly, which I will now refer to as DPB from now on, doesn't actually depend on the fruit, since it should stay consistent throughout every fruit. So knowing this, the total DPB of every Zoan is, well, I'm not actually going to be saying all these numbers, but they're on screen. You can tell why I'm not saying them. But let's just say these were a little bit inaccurate. So estimating that the Dragon reworks price will be around 10 million belly, we have to alter the values to be closer to what the DPB of a fruit worth 10 million belly would be, since fruits' DPBs actually get lower as their price gets higher. Otherwise, according to these numbers, Dragon's transform C move would do 13,800 damage. So definitely not. We can multiply all of those values by 10 million to give us another number to go by. By adding all the belly values of the fruits that are included in each move, then dividing 10 million by the average price of those fruits, then dividing the previously calculated DPBs by the results, and finally multiplying by 10 million, we get the new DPB values that should be closer to realistic. So after all those goofy calculations, we can now estimate an upper and lower bound for how much damage Dragon will do per move based on current zoan damage. For Untransformed, we can estimate that it will do the following damages per move. For the click move, at least 1,545 damage and most likely around 2,296 damage per click. For the Z move, at least 3,654 damage, but most likely around 4,395 damage. For the X move, at least 4,127 damage and more likely around 5,256 damage. For the C move, at least 4,429 damage, but most likely around 5,168 damage. For the V move, at least 2,481 damage, but most likely around 3,322 damage. For the single attack F move, at least 3,423 damage, but most likely around 4,157 damage. But if it does happen to be tick damage, then since Phoenix is the only fruit that has this untransformed, then it should be the same, about 181 damage. For transformed, we can estimate that it will do the following damages per move. For the click move, at least 1,764 damage, but more likely around 2,264 damage, which is surprisingly actually less than the untransformed, so not really sure how that works. For the Z move, at least 4,266 damage, but more likely around 4,981 damage. For the X move, at least 4,366 damage, but more likely around 5,184 damage. For the C move, at least 4,796 damage, but more likely around 5,516 damage. For the V move, no current zoan fruits deal any damage when untransforming, so the expected damage is 0. For the single attack F move, at least 3,541 damage, but more likely around 4,388 damage. For the tick damage F move, again, only Mammoth has this, so it's probably similar, around 853 damage. Please keep in mind that these damage outputs are based on my own calculations, but if you want to spend a week doing this yourself to disprove my video, go ahead. Sorry I haven't been uploading recently. This video was really annoying to make, and I also just got a little lazy, and my channel literally died for some reason. I also saw someone send me a friend request and is wearing my exact avatar, like what? I didn't think I would see anyone do that for a long time. But yeah, if you made it all the way here, might as well check if you're subscribed and watch the video on screen. I promise it won't disappoint.